All right, thank you all for coming tonight and for all that will view it on your televisions. My name is Howard Sherdatt, and we're going to talk about revolution. I've picked the topic many months ago, and with the incipient revolutions around the world and also the dissatisfactions that are occurring in this country, and felt that it might be a very valid topic. As it turns out, tonight is about close to a situation of great tenseness in this country as you can get. About a few weeks ago, they took polls, and 70% of the American public were kind of, let's say, upset about the direction of the country. I would say tonight it's probably 95%, because nobody is going to be unscathed by the things that have been going on in Washington. And I'm not a Democrat nor a Republican, I'm an independent. And as time goes on, I guess that's the best place to be, because I can throw stones at both other ends of the political spectrum. And we'll talk about the current situation here, but I want to set the tone of what revolution is, because it has some relevance for today as well, okay? Revolutions have occurred. The first revolution in recorded history was 2380 BC, so almost 5,000 years ago, when a Sumerian city revolted against the emperor. And there have been thousands, I say hundreds in my notebook, in my notes to you, because those you can recall a number of those hundreds, but there have been thousands of revolutions in recorded history. The ones I have listed, the American Revolution, the French, the Russian, etc., and so forth, but South Africa with apartheid, that was a revolution. India, there are different kind of revolutions. Some are with armaments, and some were with peaceful protest, and some, there are revolutions that are not, have anything to do with armaments. It has to do with the sexual revolution. There's been several in this country. The women have had a revolution, right, of sorts in the 60s, 70s. And what about the same-sex marriage revolution of sorts that swept and is becoming legal, just became legal in New York State. So those are other, there's a technology revolution. You and I grew up without the fantastic devices that the kids now, 3, 4, and 5 years old, know how to operate, and certainly we don't, right? The point is that we grew up in an age where you were lucky in your youth to have a phone, and then you were lucky to have a shared phone, right? And whoever dreamt that you would have a phone with no wires, which we have today, right? And the point is that those are all revolutions. And there's again, the civil rights revolution, because we had a civil war, which we'll talk about, but it was 150 years ago. This is the anniversary of the Civil War, 150 years ago. And the fact is that the blacks didn't get their civil rights until the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So things happen slowly, but they're revolutions. Civil war is a revolution, because my definition, for those of you who do not have a handout, is rapid change from within. It's not an invader. It's not something that is a foreign introduction into your society. It's something which the society itself erupts for one reason or other: social, economic, religious, racial, economic. And we're on a sort of the cusp of economic here, and we'll talk about that later. But that's what revolution is, or what it means, at least to me. The point is that we can talk endlessly about all the revolutions in this country and in other countries. We've had, again, the American Revolution, which we all know, and when we say revolution, that's what we think of generally. Or you think about the Russian Revolution. I mean, those are things that, or the French Revolution, because that we've been taught those things, but there've been, as I said, thousands. We've had 2 revolutions, because the Civil War is a revolution as well, all right? And Russia had a second revolution that we are familiar with, and that was when they changed from communism to what so-called free enterprise system. So we can go on and on. Then we know about the Spanish Revolution, because we studied that too, right? Anybody here in the Spanish Revolution? No, no. Second World War, yes, but not the Spanish Revolution. But the fact is the Cuban Revolution we know about, right? Because that's in our backyard too. Okay, and recently, obviously, the failed revolution, well, the successful revolution in Iran against the Shah, but then the failed one of a few years ago when the people tried to revolt against the government and Ahmadinejad and failed, really, or it's been certainly crushed to some extent. But now we have what? Egypt, Tunisia, Syria, right? And we have other kinds of things internally happening in the world too. They had one in Thailand. They've had one, you know, there's other kinds of almost revolutions, like Belgium doesn't have a government. Latvia doesn't have a government. Greece, they were revolting, right, against the fact that they were being told to get hold of their debt situation, right? Well, it's revolution of sorts. There's different levels and different extents and totalities. But the point is that we are in the age of revolution. It's becoming more and more evident, and more people are up in arms about it. Now, what does it say to us today? What does history tell us? What do we learn from history? Well, we learn that under certain conditions, it is much easier or much, let's say, it's much more possible for revolution because the masses of people get angry. And you see, even remember the Tiananmen Square in China when they stood in front of the tanks? So some people are willing to give up their lives for that ideal of freedom. Freedom is a very potent thing that's built into some way into most human beings, all right? Whether they're dominated on by a dictator or somehow whatever kind of government they're under, people have something inside of them that says, I want to be free of this. Most places when they have dictatorships, it is so intense, the crush on top of them, that enough people are killed or jailed or disappear that it keeps the rest of the populace quiet. But at some point, they say, enough. And that's what has happened in North Africa, right? And so this is something, however, can happen at any time when the masses of population say enough. Unfortunately, we are in that stage in this country. Now, we may not bear arms to change the government, but there's such a tremendous discontent in this country about, if you're a Republican, it's about the Democrats. If you're a Democrat, it's about the Republicans. If you're a Republican, it's about the Tea Party or the less conservative or the liberal part of the Republican Party. We have the incipient germ here of a revolution. Maybe not going to kill many people or any people at all, but it's a revolution. In other words, I heard a talk show the other day that mentioned we are really ripe now for a third-party candidate because the left and the right can't seem to get it together. We need an independent. And of course, who's the most famous independent around? Whether you like him, he's your mayor, Bloomberg. And Bloomberg is quietly making inroads politically around the country, whether you know it or not. He's giving his own money these days to various cities in this country to what? Does anybody know what he's giving money for, mostly? Well, you know, 311 is a vital resource in New York City. Has anybody here ever used 311? Well, you people are okay. You don't have to. If anybody wants any question answered or any problem in the city of New York, you can call 311 and get the answer immediately or get to the right party. Instead of saying, well, fight City Hall, right? Isn't that a common term we've all lived with? Fight City Hall, who do I call? When you call 311, you can get the right party. I've used 311. I live in Nassau County. Nassau County copied it, and I have on a number of occasions called 311 in Nassau County. All right? And we get the answer. He has given tens of millions of dollars to, I think, Detroit, Chicago, New Orleans, all over this. He is planting his political seeds all over this country, and there are probably many kind of charities or funds that he's been expending quietly, which you and I don't know about, because he wants his ideas to somehow take hold. And it's ripe now, just like Russ Perot back a few years ago, third party got 19% of the vote. I think but the point is not how will he win, because it's very difficult for either anybody outside the Republican or Democratic Party to win, but they influence policy, which I think he wants to do. And most of us are unhappy. And when I say us, about 95% of us are unhappy. Either you think the government is too liberal, or you think the government is too conservative. Whatever it is, our example is Washington. The president is making speeches every day. Boehner makes a speech. This one makes a read. They're all making speeches. I'm right, they're wrong. At some point, we either compromise, because that's the basic foundation of this country, is that you have your idea, I have my idea, that she has her idea, but we somehow come to an understanding so we can keep the government together. Civilization is at risk. Because what is civilization? If you got everything you wanted, it means somebody else may not get what they want. It's a compromise of things, give and take, sharing, because like I hear the argument, well, I made all this money, why should I give it up? Why should I have my taxes raised? Why should I? You're a socialist, you're not a, I mean, all these arguments are specious as far as I'm concerned, okay? Because we're a democratic, socialist kind of society anyway. And people say, what? Well, anybody here on Social Security? That's a socialist idea. Okay, you're too young for that. Well, when you're my age, you'll be on Social Security. Anybody here on Medicare or Medicaid? No, right? That's a socialist idea. Anybody here ever own a house and pay school taxes after your kids left the school system? Well, that's socialism after all. Why should I give my money for these other kids to go to school? Why should I pay for their education? I paid already for mine. So the point is, we always have given money. I'm sure many of you or most of you have traveled out west, and you've driven in Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah. You see no people, but the roads are very nice. The highways are nice, the bridges are safe. Who built it? There's nobody living there. You paid for that. But that's 2,000 miles away. That's socialism, I guess. It's building a country. That's what it is. And unless you have that idea of togetherness, then we are not going to go much further. We've already declined in terms of where we are as a superpower, and I don't want to get to that total discussion. But this gentleman over here said he served in the Second World War. The Second World War was like something to be thought of as a magnificent event in terms of how we responded to it. As a nation, we were fighting two countries that were geared up to take over their part of the world. They were superpowers militarily in the East with Japan and Germany, right? They had better armaments, more armaments, better trained personnel. How did we do this? How did we overcome them? Because we all pulled together. And that's the only way we're going to survive. We are in a struggle now, not politically so much, but economically. We are in war, quote unquote, with all the world economically, all right? And the reason is they look at us and say, we'll do what the Americans have done. We'll build up, we'll produce, we'll educate our people. We spend more on education per person, and we're 13th or 14th in science and technology training for our people. More and more of my doctors are Indian, Korean, or Chinese. I don't know about you, but that's more of my doctors were a certain ethnic stand, and now they're changing. And many of them are foreign born and foreign educated. So we're not educating enough doctors? Is that the point? You know, a lot of our hospitals, recruit nurses in South Africa and in the Philippines. Do you know why? Well, they speak English. And you know why? Because our nursing schools are closing. We have unemployment. Why aren't we training some of these people to become very productive members of our society? Well, that's a problem, okay? So economics is now eating away at us and the world, and there's apparently no one's come up with a solution to this point. The point I'm making, though, is that where we are and we see what's happening around the world, because part of what's happening in the North Africa was the fact that they were all educated and they saw the wealthy living well. Technology showed them that. Technology helped actually get the masses together, because it's easy to communicate now with cell phones and computers and texting and tweets and all that stuff. But also, if you're aware of it or not, you know, if you own a house or you live anywhere, Google can point to your house from the satellites circling the Earth have photographed every place in the world. Are you aware of this? So if I want to see my house, I can go on the computer and see my house. Or if I want to see your house, if you still lived in a house, I could see your house, all right? In detail, all right? So a lot of these people saw all of a sudden behind the walls, like in Gaddafi's walled community, well, they have pools and gardens, and I'm living in dirt. That's part of, they know from internet and other communications that these rich people in these countries had homes in Switzerland or in southern France or apartments in New York City or in Rio de Janeiro. They see that. They say, we got all this income, they're getting it. So the disparity in income has fomented some of that revolt. Well, do we have a disparity of income in this country? Every study you see says the rich are getting much richer. The rest of us are getting by or unemployed, one or the other. The point is, the disparity, without going into the detailed numbers, the disparity is growing. Potential reason to be very upset, okay? So all I'm saying is, this is not just here. In China, there's a growing disparity between the wealthy and the not wealthy. And this is in a communist country. There are more millionaires there than there are in this country. And there are billionaires now growing in great numbers in China. But yes, the other people are coming up, absolutely. But when they see the disparity growing and growing and growing, that's a problem for the Chinese, all right? So this is happening. It's not an American problem. But we have a problem because our basic foundation is that basically all men are created equal and we should all have a chance for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But some people are grabbing the bucks and controlling. After all, we can discuss Washington and the lobbyists that we have, and we can talk about all that, what Wall Street's done, what the banks were bailed out and all that. All that stuff says the rest of the country is unhappy. My wife and I drive around Long Island, New York City, New England, all over the country we've driven, frankly. More and more stores vacant. All right, we're supposedly coming out of a recession, but a lot of people are hurting. And now with this, now we get down to this discussion tonight, today, tonight, tomorrow, the next day, on the what? The debt. Are you aware that if we get downgraded, and we can pass the legislation for the debt increase and also be downgraded since it's gone to this point, and that'll mean higher costs for people that own homes, higher this and higher that. Even assume the government keeps sending out the checks, the interest rates are going to go up. For anything that's borrowed and you owe money, you own a mortgage, it's going up. Whatever it is going up, all right? And that is a potential damaging situation for people, the average person in this country, all right? So therein lies the left and the right, and will there be a revolution? You know, there are people get angry. Unfortunately, we see that individuals now can take action. Now that's good, but what about Timothy McVeigh? He took action. He didn't like the government, right? The guy in Norway, he took action. He didn't like the government, right? 19 guys brought down 2 cities. I'm sure most of you had been to the World Trade Centers, and I had been there many times. My son had worked there at one time. I'd been at the top, the restaurant on the top many times. You walk in there, they were marvels of engineering and of symbols of American economy and vitality. And 19 guys brought them down. Okay, not an army came over, 30,000 invaded New York and wiped it out. 19 guys wiped it out. So individuals can make big effects today, all right? So, and we have people who are angry, and if you get angry enough and enough of them, you have potential for a major situation, all right? All I'm saying is that all these events that have been happening are warning signs that governments should get their act together. And we have a government, we're at war. I mean, here we have a government fighting amongst themselves, and we're fighting a war in Afghanistan, and a war in Iraq, and potentially in Iran, and potentially in North Korea, and potentially with China, and potentially with Iran. I mean, and we can't talk to each other. Very unsteady times. Now, I don't predict we're going to have a revolution here, because I think, I hope, I pray, as you all do, that the sides will get together and come up with some situation that's acceptable to both. But I would never have predicted it would have gone to this extent now. Now, I've talked for 20 minutes on the subject, and before we go any further, I'd like to hear what you think, because this meeting that we're having now is about you and what your thoughts are, and we'll try to, now I just would say one word of caution. It's very hot out. There's a hot topic. I don't want any violence or arguments of any great loudness. Let's talk civilly. Let's be better than what we see our Congress, okay? Yes, sir.
About bank interest being 1% from 5%. You mentioned that.
Well, yes, the bank.
That's a big factor. The bank gets screwed out.
This gentleman mentioned the fact that most of us who have bank accounts went from 5 and 6 and 4% to 1%. As a matter of fact, most banks are less than 1%. Well, that's going to go up. But then your bills are going to go up too. Do you think your bills are going to go up faster than that? Oh, I think so, because everything is going to go up if the credit rating, and they even say, even now they're saying that if the government rating is affected, it'll affect the state's rating. So the states will cost more money for the states to borrow money. If the states cost more money or the cities cost more money, well, they're going to have to come out of your taxes or cut your services. Which do you want? You know, it's almost a no-win at this point, all right? But that's part of the problem. Yes, yes.
We have to think about the future of our country. And the most important priority is jobs, jobs, jobs. And the second is education for our children. If they are educated, they will be equipped to get jobs. And if we have jobs where we have to have a subsidy for infrastructure, and not, if we cut the budget, we'll lose more jobs and it will increase the deficit. The middle class is finished in this country if we do that. And then we'll have a real depression.
Okay.
And we have to be concerned about that.
Well, we are concerned.
No, but we're not. They only want to cut extension.
We here are concerned. We
we're
here,
wrong,
in this audience, we're concerned.
Yes.
The point is that solutions aren't easy, and you can cut his budget, but don't cut